Have you tasted a delicious honey wine and thought about making it, but weren't sure how? Come along with me and I'll show you how to make it quick and easy. Let's go. Hey guys, Musa here from Quantum Home Improvements and Solutions. Welcome back to the channel. Today I've got with me Brother Jeff.
How you going?
So Brother Jeff approached me a while back and asked if I'd like to make a video on honey wine. Now I've never tasted it and I've never made it, but I've done some research and found it's actually quite popular, and it's an ancient alcohol. So it was made in Asia, Africa and Europe, and the Vikings were pretty keen on it especially. So we're going to go through the process on how to make this, and but I'll just quickly ask Jeff, what was your experience when you made it?
I've only made one batch of it myself. Did a similar size to this, and it was very easy to make. I've tried to make other alcohols before, but this was by far the simplest thing I've made, and yeah, it just turned out a really nice product, and really can't go wrong with it.
Excellent. So what we're going to do now, I've already sanitized the fermenter, and there's sanitized water in that, but we'll actually get the honey to a boil. So you do have to boil the honey for a minimum of 2 hours. Now the recipe I'm going to use is from Country Brewers. So there's 15 branches, and but they don't have one in Mexico. So, but they do have in South Australia, Tasmania, New South Wales and Queensland. So we're going to go by this recipe. It's called the Mead recipe. So this particular wine is called the Mead wine, made from honey. And it's very simple, and the ingredients are pretty basic. Okay, so the first thing I've got to do is put this pot to a boil, and I'm going to put in there, the recipe says 8 kilos of honey, and I'm going to put 5 litres of water with that to boil it up. Now this particular honey is actually made by Farrugia's Natural Honey, and that's sourced locally in the west of Sydney. So we just pour them in. So what I'm going to do is wash these jars out with hot water once that water starts to boil. And so I'll just put some water in there, close the lid, shake it up and just get more honey out. All right, so while we're waiting for that to come to a boil, I'll just give you a bit of information. Okay, so going by the recipe, they say once you bring it to a boil, it's a soft boil or a rolling boil, so not too hot. Now the reason you need to boil this and for 2 hours basically is because any kind of product that is made like a honey that's been bottled or jarred, a fruit, has actually a natural yeast in it. And so you've got to boil out the yeast, plus also break down the honey into the water. So, but that's a secondary thing. So if I was to use the other recipes, they do add spices and all these other things. I've kept it basic because it's my first time. Jeff was telling me earlier that if the mead is not to your liking in sweetness, you can actually add more honey. So Jeff, would you like to tell us more about that?
Yeah, so when you're brewing it down, you can make it as dry as you want, and then once you taste it, once it's finished fermenting, if you think you want it more sweet,
yep,
you can just put some more honey in there. They recommend that you kill off any of the bacteria that's left in there, so you use some canned tablets or something like that, and then just add a little bit of honey, stir it up, have a little sip, and once you get it the way you want, so it's really, you don't have to worry too much about the flavour. Okay. Once all the alcohol's there, you can just make it as sweet as you want in the end. So
great, that's a great tip.
That's another thing why it's so, you just get the right taste.
Yeah.
That's why it's so easy, because you just keep adding little bits.
I'm looking forward to tasting this. Now it is recommended that you rack the wine at around 10 weeks, and you bottle it just after 6 months. So this brew takes a long time before you can drink it. Well, it's recommended. So the longer you leave it, the better it's going to taste. And that's with most things that you brew. In this case, I think it's even more important. Okay, so I've got a bit of foam out of that. Once I've got it to a boil, or to a soft boil, and Jeff calls it scum. So I've just taken some of the scum out. It transfers the heat better, I think. Okay, so the temperature is now sitting on roughly around about 90 degree, and it's got a nice soft roll to the boil. So now I'm going to leave that for 2 hours. If it gets a bit too warm, I will drop it down a little bit more. We don't want to make this into a toffee. Very important to be very careful not to overboil it. And I will continue stirring it. The reason I stir it is because I noticed that the honey was sitting on the bottom, and I've stirred it and just got that mixed through. So I've stirred it a little bit, and now it's really boiling nicely. Jeff and I are now going to mix the water mixed with honey into these jars and try to get more honey out of them. So before brewing anything, you need to sanitize the fermenter, whether it's a beer or wine. And I use Brigalo's sanitizer. So it's 100% sodium metabisulfate. So this particular bottles that I'm filling up with the sanitized water is actually not for the honey mead. In actual fact, it's for my next brew in the next couple of days. So I've had a request from Raj, who's asked me to make another type of Cooper's beer. So I'm going to be doing Australian Pale Ale, which is really popular, but with a difference. Raj's climate is roughly around about 35 degree. So I've run Cooper's and I've spoken to Frank, and he's advised me to use a yeast that can brew at 35 degrees. So I've went and bought that, and I'll give more detail on the next video. Okay, so you bring the honey mead up to 23 litres in the fermenter. So 23 litres would give you usually around 30 or just below 32 bottles. But because you have to rack it a couple of times, you'll probably lose a bit. So it'll probably give you around 30 bottles, probably just a little bit less. And it's hard for me to tell at this point because I haven't done it before. But I'm really looking forward to tasting this. Brother Jeff was telling me the history of honey mead, and the most famous mead makers in the world are actually monks. And there's a bit of a story to that. Jeff, do you mind telling?
Yeah, so in the medieval days, the monks would keep bees to make wax candles for the churches, and then the honey was the byproduct of all the wax. And so they'd use that honey to make alcohol for wedding feasts, which are celebrated in the church. And then when the wedding was over, they'd give all the leftover mead to the newlywed couple. So they'd have about a month's worth of mead to kickstart their wedded life. And that's where the term honeymoon comes from. It's a month of honey mead. So
wow, that's an incredible story. Yeah. I always wondered where honeymoon came from.
Yeah, strange word.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah. And I feel a bit, affiliated with that story because I kind of, I'm a monk myself. In a way. We're not really monks, but I feel like I'm
You're monkish.
Carrying on that tradition, yeah.
Okay, so Brother Jeff is actually studying at the moment and studying to be a priest, and will become a deacon in the next couple of months, and then later this year, God willing, a priest.
God willing, yeah.
And so Jeff has been training through Don Bosco, through the charism of the Salesians, and which is a 10-year, I think, study.
Yep.
And so, yeah, we're looking forward to having Brother Jeff as a priest.
Yeah.
And now we'll just put the bottles away, and we'll wait for the honey to reach 2 hours. We won't go 3, purely because we don't have all the spices, so I don't think it needs to be over boiled, but it is recommended 2 to 3 hours. Okay, so I'll wash this fermenter out now, and you need to wash it out with hot water and with no soap. Okay, so the honey mead has now come to a boil for 2 hours, and it's ready to go. We've taken out the last bit of what Jeff calls the scum.
Skim the scum.
Skim the scum. So we're now ready to put this brew together. So when I sanitized everything, including the tap, the spoon, the restrictor, the air restrictor. So I bought another tap, and the reason I've done that, because I want a sediment reducer. So the sediment reducer is basically to reduce the amount of sediment that goes into the next fermenter when I'm racking it. So I'm going to put that in. So it's going to be a little difficult to put this on being the first time of threading, but that's going pretty easily.
You happy with that?
Yeah. Wow, this smells really good. Okay, so just slowly pour that in. And look at that colour. That looks amazing. Beautiful. So now we'll just bring that up to 23 litres. Good shot. And get ready and stop there. Stop. Beautiful. Okay, so the temperature looks good now. I'm just going to do a quick hydrometer reading and then we can progress to the next stage. Okay, so it's just one notch under 1.1 and I'll record that. Okay, so the next thing to do, going by the recipe, we put in the Yeast Nutrient, and this is a 4-gram sachet. They say to put in 1 teaspoon. And there we are. I'll just give that a quick swirl. You don't need to mix this too much, just to get that around. Okay, so the final thing to do now, we've got our temperature right. Now we're going to just put in the yeast. Okay, so the yeast is TCB, wine and champagne all-purpose. I'm going to put the whole packet in. So this is, I bought this from Country Brewers. So it's not advisable to stir this in. So I'm just going to place this in just slowly. Put the lid on. And you need to put the lid on quite tight. Okay, so I'll put the air restrictor in to reduce any oxygen getting into the fermenter, and we'll keep that on for the duration of the fermenting. Okay, so the brew is now complete, thanks to Brother Jeff and to Dee from Country Brewers Nepean. I'm really looking forward to tasting this, but first I'm going to have to wait 8 to 10 weeks and then rack this over to another vessel, another fermenter, and then around 3 to 6 months rack it once more. But I can taste it after 6 months, depending on when I racked it last. But Dee tells me that it won't reach its potential taste until 5 years if you're willing to wait. Now this particular recipe is Dee's recipe, and she has 4 others, but I'll post this particular recipe in the descriptions below. And Dee also has over 100 other types of recipes of different products. And I will put her descriptions below for you to contact her directly if you're not in this local Nepean area. And one last thing with Dee, she has tasting days and also training days. And she also sells meats and cheeses. So it's well worth contacting her. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And if you like, please put a comment below and I will get back to you. And I'd ask if you please consider to subscribe, hit the like button and possibly share this video. And there's many more videos to come. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks guys.